Welcome to Sounding Board, a production of Soroptimist International of Novato, whose mission it is to improve the lives of women and girls through projects leading to social and economic empowerment. I'm Freda Kaplan, and my guest today is Linda Witong, who's a research consultant for Soroptimist International on UN, the United Nations, related matters. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you for having me.
Today we're going to be talking about children are fleeing for their lives, and unaccompanied children are coming to the U.S. alone.
That's right.
And I would like to ask you how you chose the title.
Fleeing for their lives?
Yes.
Because in doing my research about this horrible statistic, this horrible fact, I had one case where I saw where the grandmother said to her boy, she said, "If you stay here and join a gang, the other gang will kill you. If you stay here and do not join a gang, they will kill you. You need to go somewhere where you can be safe." And so the boy headed off on his own through various different countries to the United States to flee the violence that was rocking his country and the gang warfare.
So this is mostly in Central America?
It is mostly in Guatemala, San Salvador, and Honduras that gang warfare or violence is just rocking the countries. And I'm not to say that other people aren't also fleeing for their lives. The asylum rate, since the violence has really gotten out of control, has increased 712% in seeking asylum in Mexico, Panama, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Belize since 2019.
So we're not the only ones.
No, but the United States is considered a land of tremendous opportunity and safety for these children. And so that's why I entitled it, "They're Running for Their Lives."
So they're coming because of the violence that's going on?
They are. And that started, the authorities noticed an increase in the amount of unaccompanied children, and that's what I'm talking about, who were coming across the United States border starting in 2014. It was considered a humanitarian crisis because they saw children as fleeing extreme violence in their own areas. And the surge, unfortunately, has continued through 2016, and the trend is continuing in terms of an increase of children. In September 2016, there was an article that said already up to August, 50% of the 369,411 refugees that were found in the United States, that's not including people who've skipped or have gone through the cracks, so to speak, were children. And that's up to August.
And we don't usually hear about them. We hear about illegal immigration. We hear a little bit about families with children, but we don't hear very much.
Well, if it's true, it's not, shall we say, on our daily news feeds and all that, but it's definitely been covered in some of the national media and certainly in the Southwest, because that's where the border is most affected. The age of children is from 0 to 17, are the age of children that will be coming across the border.
What dangers do they face getting to the border?
Well, there's like a 500% increase in certain areas, 239% increase in other areas of children. The Senate has even observed this high rate of children. They're coming in part because of economic opportunity, but they're also, and we're talking about children, and I think an increase has also been measured specifically for children that are under the age of 12. And so picture a child under the age of 12 coming across the border. And here they are, they should be playing with their toys, they should be protected, they should be children, and they're making choices that a child should never have to make. The dangers they face begin when they're going and being trafficked. First of all, the type of violence that's causing them to leave. I took the liberty of getting some examples. In one country, children were being targeted and massacred and dismembered to send a message of who was in control. Children. Another boy who was 17, who was from San Salvador, said he saw gang members kill young people like him and then kill his stepfather. And it was at that point he knew he had to leave. Another gang member said that the gang came to his school and said, if you return to school, you weren't going to make it home alive. Another boy who fled to Honduras is where the grandmother said, they're going to shoot you if you stay. No, you join a gang, they're going to shoot you. The rival gang will shoot you. If you don't, they're going to shoot you. You need to go. No one will shoot you if you leave. Girls in El Salvador, 14-year-old girls said they're taking girls out, they're killing them. They're being buried in their uniforms and their school books. Other girls were afraid to go to school because they might be kidnapped, raped, assaulted, and passed around like a party favor among the gangs that were controlling the neighborhood. It was all about power. It was all about showing we're in control. Why the kids were being targeted, before we even get to what the dangers were, is that they are young, they're easy to control, they're easy to intimidate, they're easy to bully. And so they would take away the kids' identifying documents, they would put the kids with 20 other kids, they would have their families go into debt, so they would say to them, if you get one step out of line, your family is going to have to answer for your debt. And they would then intimidate and bully them to stay and do what they want. Very often they would even transport them in highly unsafe conditions, you know, crowded in like almost a cattle call. The cartels and other organized crime were targeting these children because they were making a profit by transporting them. They were making a profit by getting the false documents for the kids once they were supposedly getting through the United States. Their pay once they got to wherever they were was low or nothing if they survived, and I'll get to that in a second. And then they would charge them for accommodations, food, and transport. So the profit was tremendous for the traffickers. They became victims on the journey, and I'm going to concentrate with the girls at this point. The girls became victims of being raped, being sexually assaulted in some manner, maybe even being killed if they tried to go against the wishes of their captors. And so their danger would start right at the very beginning of their trip. The boys and the girls would all have the danger of what do you do if you're caught by people or by law enforcement authorities. Then they may actually send you back to your own country, or they may send you to another country where you may even have a worse issue than the country of your own origin. No one wanted to go down that path.
Not be able to speak.
No, no. Assuming that they made it to the border, that the transport that they were in didn't kill them, that they didn't get raped or killed during the trip through there, that they didn't get caught. Then what dangers? Well, one of the kids was talking about that, and he said how he waded through water that was infested with crocodiles. He drank the murky waters, and he slept in locked rooms with 20 people. So he thinks, okay, once I get across the border, I'm okay. But the coyote just left him there. So he didn't have any food, he didn't have any water, he didn't have any shelter. He's trying to get through the desert because they left him in a desert area by himself. He lost all hope. He just laid down. He thought, I'm going to die. Fortunately for him, he was rescued. Others aren't so lucky. Then let's say the kid is with the coyote, but they run out of money, or they lose their papers, or maybe they're being addicted by then to drugs because they've been furnished drugs to sedate them or to control them. What do? They're there in a strange country. There's two ways they go. Some are actually trafficked from the very beginning into prostitution or forced labor. Some kids are left out on the streets to fend for themselves. And there's statistics that have said that if you're a child and you're out in the streets on your own, within 48 hours, you will be approached by a predator who will try and sexually exploit you. So that is a danger that children will have if they're on their own.
In this country.
In this country. The forms of exploitation are not only being for prostitution, but pornography, The other forms of exploitation, either through, and I'm going to go right now through traffickers who are trafficking the children. They may be here under the ruse that they think they're coming for a better life, and their families may have even given over a deed to their property so their children can come here for a better life or to be safe. They may end up in domestic labor. The other forms of exploitation are, in some cases, organ removal. In some cases, illegal adoption, if they're very, very young children. Begging rings, and sometimes families are all trafficked for this purpose. They'll be sent to beg to get money. They don't get to keep any of the money. It's going to whoever is their handler. The other thing are traveling sales rings. In some cases, magazine sales and other things, they'll be traveling in sales. They'll stay in a hotel room, a number of them, and they're not outside of their caretaker's purview for a very limited period of time. And what are they going to do? They don't have the papers. They're afraid of law enforcement authorities. They're afraid to complain. So they're, especially if they're children, they're going to be compliant. And the traveling sales rings would probably be 15 or 16-year-olds. The beggars could be much younger. They prefer younger or even disabled children for that, unfortunately. They may be put into the drug production as couriers or sellers, you know, or go-betweens for drugs. In forced labor, there was the egg case, which was where boys were, they thought they were going to get a better life, and they ended up working in a chicken factory and doing horrendous jobs dealing with chickens, dismembering, bespeaking them. But then they also lived in horrible substandard lodging. You know, they had very little food. Their lodging was horrible. Maybe there wasn't even electricity. Maybe there wasn't even a sanitary facility. But the kicker for me came when I was reading about this case was where they weren't being paid. And so one of the little boys was saying, well, I need to be paid to send it back to my family. And the trafficker called the father in front of the boy and said, the boy is not working. And if he doesn't work, we will have someone come to you and shoot you and kill you. And he's saying that to the father in front of the boy. And it wasn't necessarily an idle threat, because when you're especially dealing with traffickers who are organized crime or cartels, they know where your parents live. They know that they can take the deed to their property, they can threaten to kill the parents, they can threaten to kill the children of the parents, or the whole family. And so what's the little boy to do? The little boy is going to go and work in the egg factory and never make a complaint again. These are some of the highlights.
Wow, this is in the United States now.
Yes, this is. Yes, this is.
And they pick children, they pick on
children. Children are, again, much easier to exploit. The families are sending their children because they just want them to be safe.
Safer than where they are.
Yes, which is understandable. And the children, I just imagine a little 12-year-old who, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was 12 years old, my biggest crisis of which doll was I going to play with, right? All of a sudden, these children are with these strangers who may be abusing them on their way even to the border. And on a good day, maybe I won't desert them at the border, but if they do desert them, then a 12-year-old is left to fend for themselves. And they could be preyed upon by traffickers inside the United States, or they can be preyed upon by traffickers who bring them into the United States to have them work in all sorts of facets, like I told you, and be exploited. And they're young, and they're easy to, again, bully, they're easy to intimidate, and there they are.
And they can be adopted. That's a fact that's very frightening.
Adoption at an early age. They have babies coming through here that, you know, are part of that type of situation. And in some cases, there's some organ trafficking that's done
horrifying.
Too. Yeah, you know, anything. I mean, these children, their children are meant in my world, in my mind, to be protected and to be able to be children and to be able to be educated and get a much better life, a safe existence. And these children aren't left with many choices or options.
Whoa, this is really sobering and very upsetting to hear about.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. And California, unfortunately, is one of the highest, has one of the highest incidents of child trafficking, and the Bay Area has one of the highest incidents of child trafficking in the United States. So there you have it.
So right among us here.
Yes.
This is going on.
Where you have individuals that have a lot of money, you can pay for something which, unfortunately, throughout the world is considered a, what was the word I want? Something that's a really good sellable commodity, because these kids are, girls and boys are considered commodities. And if you have the money, you can buy anything, including a little kid. And so if you have a lot of money in the Bay Area, and you have a lot of interest in this type of market, there you go.
How frightening.
Frightening and sad. But children, however they get here, deserve our protection.
Yes.
They deserve to be fed, clothed, educated, and in a perfect world, to be given the chance of having a better life where they're not being preyed upon as victims of violence. You read all of these horrific stories that are happening in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and how these kids are seeing their friends and their family being murdered right and left, and are being told, quite frankly, by their family, you've got to get out of here or you're not going to survive.
Is the state doing anything? Are our courts doing anything?
In 2014, it started with our local Attorney General said this is a humanitarian crisis and we have to do something. Back then, they were desperately trying to find attorneys who could represent these children in court and get them as good of a deal as they could, you know, and asylum perhaps to stay in this country. They were taken by surprise of the huge amount of children that were coming across the border in 2014. And so they really didn't have the facilities. And so a lot of times they would give them a note to appear in court, and they would give them over to, quote, a caretaker. Very often these caretakers were traffickers, and the children nor the caretaker ever appeared again. The facilities have gotten better, and there are more of them, but it's still a strain on resources, you know, how to deal with all of these children and how to make sure that if they are released to someone, that these people are legitimate and won't exploit them in any further way.
Yes.
And that's a challenge I think that remains with the United States and with the various entities. Entities are trying to do their best, and especially when it comes to children, they're trying to do their best to protect them and to make sure no one falls through the cracks. And unfortunately, since 2014, they've had a lot of practice in trying to do that.
So foster homes are where they try to place them? There are no organized central locations?
There's all of the above, but in trying to make sure that foster homes or caretakers are legitimate or have the child's best interest is a challenge, because they found some foster homes as having far more children than they said they had, and some of the children just disappeared. Where did they go? Now that was back in 2014 that some of those stories were emerging.
So there are fewer stories like that now?
I haven't
Or they're
had
just not emerging?
I think I haven't had a chance to research it recently, but even in 2016, they were having issues in trying to make sure that everyone who said they were going to be a caretaker or a foster parent was qualified to do that, and again, had the child's best interests in mind. And these are the kids that they're finding.
Yeah.
That isn't, taking into account the children that are coming across the border that they don't even have any idea about.
Wow. Is the UN able to do anything about this?
The UN and the United States and Mexico built yes, the UN is doing everything it can to try and help. Mexico tried to reinforce its border to stop the children from coming into Mexico, right? That wasn't working out very well for them. No. They were finding ways, again, where there's a way to make money and to get children, because again, the traffickers and the coyotes are getting paid a lot of money to transport the children, get them to the border, or so they claim to the families that, in the places they're leaving. But meanwhile, even though Mexico built a stronger border, they're just figuring out ways to get around it. And so that hasn't quite worked out as planned.
There are other countries that children or even adults are being trafficked from that we don't hear about, or illegal immigrants. that people are bringing in, but this is a big crisis.
Well, to me, the reason I covered it was because the age of the children was getting to be younger and younger. And there were so many of them that were children that were coming here alone. And that is what at least struck me about that issue, was you're having these kids come across the border by themselves at a younger age. And the reason they were coming, it used to be, you know, a lot of the kids, or not kids so much, but older kids would come because of the economic opportunities. Right. And that is still playing a big factor. But they're also fleeing, as I said, fleeing for their lives. It's like they're not being given much of a choice. If they stay in their country, they're going to die.
So being exploited here is...
Well, they don't, you know, children and their families hope that that's not going to happen. They hope that they're going to have a better life here. And they're sold, as I would say, a false bill of goods. And some of them will say, well, maybe you'll end up working as a domestic servant, but it's better than being killed. Yeah. At least I know you're alive somewhere. Yeah. You know, the alive somewhere becomes more and more of an issue if you're a domestic servant and you're living in a closet and you're, you know, maybe a slave, yeah, or you're like in the egg farm where you're a slave there, or you're in prostitution. You know, then it's like, I'm sure many children think maybe it wouldn't have been so bad there, except you're still, as their family would say, you're still alive.
Yeah, yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Well, this is very sobering to think about, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all these insights.
You're welcome.
Oh. It's hard to even imagine. Well, with your help, though, we're imagining this.
Not just me, with the help of all sorts of entities, organizations, communities, volunteers, the United States, the individual states, and the United Nations. It takes a global village to try and, number one, help the children, and number two, to try and stop the violence from happening. Stop it.
Yes.
You know, so that the children can live in their own areas and grow up as children in their own culture, in their own world.
Ideally. Yes, that would be wonderful.
Yes, it would. That's what we're working toward.
Good.
Yeah.
I think more people should be working toward that.
Well, maybe when they see this, they will.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we've learned so much about this. Maybe we can help.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Linda, for being with us and sharing these insights with us. And I want to thank everybody for watching this show, and I hope that you feel that you could maybe help a little. And I want to thank the Buck Institute for Research on Aging for sharing their lovely television studio with us, and to the Soroptimist crew for working on these shows, making them possible. Thank you.